We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke Britton Financial Partners. Today's guest was co-founder and former CEO of EvoLogic, so any of our local listeners will probably know who I'm talking about already. He also now represents an organisation called EOS Worldwide, where he is an EOS Implementer. Today's guest is Chris Davies. Chris, thanks for joining me in sunny Geelong West, looking out over Geelong West Park.
You've been here long enough, you'd think you'd know, but
you think I would know? Or I don't know, what is it called? Do you know what that's called?
I also was trying to throw you under the bus.
I know.
Here I am with you.
Listen, I know the restaurant across the road, Folklore. We use that every day. I don't go and sit in the park very often. So,
fair enough.
Mate, thanks again for jumping on the podcast. I know you and I had a catch-up maybe, I don't know, it was a month ago or so, wasn't it?
It's quite a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, where we talked about the fact that you'd had a sort of a change in your direction with work. Your previous role as CEO of EvoLogic had come to an end,
yep,
and you're on to some other new pastures. What I want to talk about today is, first of all, what you're doing now. But before we get there, I think it's worthwhile actually going back a few steps. I forgot to say also in the intro that you're a professional CrossFitter as well. Is that what you said in your bio? I thought that was a bit of a stretch, to be honest, mate, to say you're a professional CrossFitter.
I really hope my form-up coach hears this, because there is no way. I remember sitting on the bike one point in the middle of a CrossFit gym, and one of the coaches walks past and says, "Wow, you breathe really well for someone that's so inconsistent." I thought, is that a compliment? I think it might be.
Are you still CrossFitting now?
Look, I had some heart issues. I had
that's right.
atrial fibrillation, so I had a bit of a zip-zap and Feb. But before that, I'd probably had to stop for the last 12 months. So I think day before yesterday, started the push-up challenge, and I've never felt so unfit in my life.
Yeah. How much did you get in?
Yesterday was 110, day before was like 52.
Yep.
So today I went, I'm going to go 50-50 air squats, and I'm going to go with that.
Here's a useless fact. I told Ben, you like to see how our podcasts go now, mate. There's a little bit of transgression, a little bit of diversion down some rabbit holes. But I was talking to Ben about exercise, and Ben said to me, I'm going to start doing some more push-ups. So I said, Peter every morning does his age plus GST and push-ups unbroken. That's his. So as he's getting older.
Oh my God.
So as he's getting older, he always adds a year plus GST just for fun. So PB, he's 70, and so he's doing 77, and he normally, adds a couple in for good luck. So he's doing the best part of 80 unbroken push-ups as a part of a routine in the mornings. I think it's got something to do with him. He'd be in the cold shower, maybe doing squats. When we're younger, he would always, he'd have his heel up on any bench, always stretching his hamstrings, I tend to do that now as well. Anyway, we digress. Let's get back to Chris Davies. So Chris, let's go back to early days. Let's go back to South Australia, where you were born and how you eventually came to Geelong. Or not eventually, because it wasn't too long after you were born that you moved to Geelong. So Let's start where you were born, your parents, and then where you went to school.
Parents were Welsh immigrants, so paid for by BHP to come over, and my dad's an engineer who worked at the Whyalla steel mill in South Australia. So red dust as far as the eyes can see. Thankfully for me, I see in hindsight, they moved to Geelong when I was 6 months old. Dad was an engineer in one of the lines out at Alcoa. So Grovedale, Dad's still in the same house. Grovedale Secondary High School was across the road.
Yep.
I had no choice in going anywhere else.
So no private school for you back then, mate? It's just You go to the school that's nearest that you can walk to.
Well, that's what it used to be, right?
I'm tipping your parents didn't drive you to school.
Well, I was always the last one. I was always late.
Yeah.
Because I'd hear the bell go off, then I'd get out of bed.
Yeah, you're making
literally across the road.
Making efficient use of your time. No point wasting. I'm sure you were doing something productive in that time where you were sleeping.
Rest. Right?
Rest. Yeah, that's
important thing we can do, right?
Yeah.
As a teenager. But yeah, that was a great school. I've got lots of great stories about, some people will judge a technical high school for being a technical high school, and there are some phenomenally successful people in my year from that same school that I just feel it's more about who you are than it is about the school you go to.
Yeah, 100%. And a similar story with I was West Tech or Western Heights Secondary College, and also Bell Park tech, which then became part of the Amalgamated Western Heights. But yeah, a number of people that I went to school with that have become extremely successful. And some of them are my best mates.
Yep.
Like two of my best mates are two of the most successful people that I know. And yeah, it's like you said, it's what's in you, but it's also I suppose, your desire to actually continue to improve and get better and be curious about the world and everything that's
the key.
Yeah.
Consistently learning. I mean, my wife grew up in Corona Lane, so we have arguments about who's married the wrong side of the tracks, who married up here. I'm not sure.
How long did your wife live out in Corona Lane for?
I think she was probably early teens when they moved to Manny Heights.
Okay. Did she go to school out there?
Primary school, and then went to Sacred Heart after.
Okay.
So
Yep.
Catholic family.
Yep.
So yeah, I burst into flames when I walk into the house every time.
Of course.
Why wouldn't you? Groveview was amazing. Great place to grow up. I still go back and visit my father and, yeah, pull up in the driveway and look across the road at my old high school, and it all comes flooding back. But the whole learning and the continual desire to be something or to learn something new, I mean, that can be considered nerdy and geeky, which is kind of how I fell into IT. But that whole conversation around what else can I learn? How can I, something pops up, I'm going to Google that. I want to understand that.
You weren't Googling it back when you were at school, though, were you?
No.
What did you do? So did you spend a bit of time in the library, and were you a nerdy kid?
No, I was it's probably similar to, I see it in my own kids, that whole doesn't quite meet potential or disruptive influence in class, could do better.
Yeah.
I think we've had this conversation.
Likes to be the centre of attention, easily distracted, that kind of thing.
Yep. So I wasn't necessarily the centre of attention, but 100% distracted, always looking out the window, something else interesting. Must be happening somewhere else. More interesting than this. My parents had a full set of Funk and Wagnalls encyclopedias, and that was about it. Wanted to be a jazz musician.
Okay.
Or an architect. Didn't do the right maths to get into architecture, so my dad brought out the old course guide and said, well, this is the score you've got. You should do this electronics degree.
And so you did. And that was it. Was that Deakin?
Yeah, so Rusden campus up in Melbourne. So
okay.
I lived in Melbourne with a mate for a year. Second year, I think he failed maybe half his subjects, and I failed 6 out of 8 subjects in the second year. So my parents quickly said, yeah, we're coming home.
Okay. Was this the Bachelor of Applied Science in Microprocessor Applications?
Yeah, the longest name ever.
Okay.
So effectively control systems for process. So building conveyor systems and the electronics behind that.
And so you were there for a year and you did terribly?
Second year, terribly.
Okay.
Had to go in front of the academic performance committee and convince them to let me back in.
Show cause?
Yeah, so they let me back in. I completed, I deferred when I got a job at Alcoa. But
in tech?
Yeah, in their IT department.
Okay.
Which, a couple of years I was managing a site in Sydney for them, and then came back to Geelong to coordinate the IT team down here. So that was sort of the moment when I actually resigned from that to move to Melbourne, was because I was put into a leadership position that I didn't want, which I speak to a lot of people now who are technicians at heart or technical people who enjoyed the work they do that keep getting pushed into management positions and don't want them because they want to be a technician. So it took me quite a while to realise that maybe people was where I should be focusing.
Yeah.
And someone was telling me something.
Okay. And so that was kind of a realisation you came to. If you reflect back, I mean, by the sounds of it, were you always a people person?
I'm a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Certainly don't want to be disliked by anyone, which is a massive challenge when you run a business. It's really hard.
It's almost impossible.
It is. It's really hard to get the most out of people when you actually won't hold them accountable to what the business requires, which is why I love what I do now, because it's coaching people through that, but I don't actually have to do it myself. So yeah, it was a good realisation, but it didn't happen. I had to start the business before I realised that maybe people was what I was good at.
Yeah.
Because I was working for some cool people in Melbourne, small business, started 3 people, 4 people, grew to 15 by the time I left. And a friend of mine from Alcoa and I went, let's do this ourselves. The IT industry in Geelong hasn't got a great name. This was like 2000, 2002. So we decided to, again, a few people are doing this. The mentality is, let's bring the enterprise level of support down to small business. You soon realise that they don't want that, nor do they want to pay for that. So it was a challenging conversation to have. But we thought we knew everything. This is the epitome of don't know what you don't know. Unconsciously incompetent, that whole conversation. Luckily found out reasonably quickly that I didn't know anything about business. So fell back into that learning mindset. And for good and for worse, spent so much time just reading and absorbing, and was lucky enough to fall in and find a mentor. As much as I don't like the word mentor, and he'd tell me I was an idiot for calling him a mentor, I got very strong opinions on words like entrepreneur and mentor. I think we've spoken about that before.
Maybe a little overused now.
Oh.
They've lost some of their gravitas. They're a bit too ubiquitous now. It's like journey.
Journey. Look, the second you call yourself a mentor, I think that takes the shine.
Yeah, or an entrepreneur, or what's the other one here? Lifestyle freedom got, in financial planning terms, like lifestyle freedom.
Yeah.
That had always been it grates on me now, but they're just words. So
They are. So, I mean, and this is the work I do now. It's actually called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So it's taken me a couple of years to start to fall in love with that word again, and not because of who it represents. An entrepreneur is just somebody who will generally take risks and do a small amount of work to try and generate a large amount of outcome. And there's an agility to it. There's another word, agile. And so I'm there's other organizations I work with now that they need that entrepreneurial spirit to be able to make a change. So I'm trying to fall in love with the word again.
yeah. So let's go back again to the sort of genesis of EvoLogic, and maybe it was a 20+ year journey from early 2000s to your exit as CEO to other pastures. But maybe run me through that progression from foundation and maybe some of the learnings, because this will hopefully lead nicely into the EOS principles and what you're doing now.
Yeah, okay. Well, 2002, thinking you can do it better is usually the inspiration people have to start their own business. They either want to make more money, have more freedom, or think they want to have control over the work they do because the quality they want to deliver. Those are usually the three things that people want to do. I wanted all of them. So a mentor of mine who taught me a lot of stuff in IT.
Can I just ask a question there? How did you find your mentor? So were they an IT person, or did you go and seek your mentor out?
So there's two people to talk about here. So my former business partner, when I was in IT, taught me a bunch. Like I refer to him as one of my early mentors. We haven't got a relationship now, which is unfortunate, but I was a member of the CEO Institute for quite some time, and there was a chair in that group he's got an OAM for his contribution to small business, particularly in regional Victoria. Brilliant human being. And he just said at the end of one CEO session, look, do you want me to drop by and have a look at your balance sheet and see if I can help? And that turned into what has been a 15-year relationship where, just luckily enough, I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't be where I am without him, without his advice. So the foundation of the business, we grew really, really quickly through the first sort of 8 years. We had a different offering. We were one of the first to fix price, to provide a scope of service. A lot of the competition at the time was still PC-based, and they were just, it breaks, we'll come and fix it and we'll charge you for it. And if it takes us 3 hours or 15 minutes, you'll get charged 15 minutes or 3 hours. So we were fixing that price. We were wearing the risk. It was novel at that time. I tell a story about the first sales call I ever did, which was in a not-for-profit, actually, who I'm still involved with. And the exec director at the time, I sat down in front of him and I unzipped my folio and put it down. I was ready to do, it was my first sales call. They were a referral from Alcoa. And this guy goes, look, before you start, I'm going to have to stop you. I think all you IT guys are you're like accountants and lawyers, you're all snakes. And I did not know how to cope, but they are still a client of EvoLogic to this day. And that was a sort of a moment for me to go, shit, this industry really has a bad name, which formed the why for Evo. The purpose that we had as an organization was to change businesses' perception of the IT industry. So everything we did was for businesses to go, shit, that's great. We really need that. So, and I think the industry did evolve in some way, that there was a bit more of a partnership between business and technology. And as that happened, we realized that it needed to be even deeper than that. And finance and legal get representation at the board level. Technology needs the same thing because that's where the world was going. So our purpose changed to create IT as, what do we call it, as a business acumen that's represented at the board table, or words to that effect. So that was it was a bit of a journey as the journey word, to move between who we are, and that can change as you grow throughout a business. GFC hit sort of 2009, 10. For us, we kept growing and I couldn't figure out why. We were over-servicing and undercharging, and that's a shitty business strategy. So quickly ran out of cash, which caused a real challenge, as cash does. We were probably 3 months away from trading insolvent, and that caused a partnership buyout. One of us had to go. I was the one that ended up there. So we then had to rebuild the business. Found this book called Traction maybe a couple of years after that. Thought it was amazing, blew my mind.
Where did you find the book?
I was actually Googling, looking for what's the best practice for a meeting cadence in a business, and I think we're about 15, 16 staff at that stage. So how do I ensure that I have contact and communicate with people on a regular enough cadence that's not overly, we're just having shitty meetings, right?
Anyone relate to that? I'm sure plenty of people can. Yeah.
A mate of mine, he goes, it's not meetings that are shitty, it's just your meetings that are shitty. You're just not running them right. So I found this book, Traction by Gino Wickman, blew me away. But like most of us, I popped it back in the bookshelf and got sucked back into BAU in running my business and forgot about it until I ran into another mate of mine who introduced me to EOS again, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System, what a great term. And we started implementing some tools and disciplines in the business that allowed me to be able to step up and back and be able to do a bit more on.
So 2008 to 10 GFC, the buyout, when did you start the implementation of some of the EOS principles? What year would it have been?
It would have been probably 2017, 2016. 2016 was probably our first. So the first iteration of our leadership team with our first quarterly planning session, defining our core values, defining our core focus, who we are, what we stand for and what we do better than anybody else, defining where we're going to be in 10 years. Like, let's cast a vision out here for our staff. It was a galvanizing moment, second galvanizing moment for the business. Almost going out of business, phenomenally galvanizing moment for your team. Those that want to be in are in. The challenge that we had was that to get through that moment, we had to hug our clients so hard to ensure that they didn't leave. The over-servicing continued and it became who we were as a business. We just kept over-servicing. So at one point I realized that maybe we were never going to break that. So that became part of our business plan. And to have longer-term clients, longer-term staff that were satisfied, I was happy to take a smaller percentage of profit because I had less issues to deal with. I had less recruitment. I had less challenges. So you've got to pay for it somewhere. And I chose to pay for it in a smaller bottom line because everything else was easier. And that's one way to deal with business, as opposed to you can have a massive bottom line, but you'll have massive customer churn, potentially massive staff churn as a result because you're driving people to the line. You got to pick your suck, right? Which one do you want to deal with?
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit. You implemented the EOS system. You had some success with that. So from sort of early teens to 2022, is that right? Yeah. So
it's probably 6 years, I think we ran EOS within the business. An usual term that we sort of have clients sit with us with is about that 18 months, 2 years, because they can get through the toolbox. And we use the term master the tools, which we all know mastery is a never-ending journey. But mastery to us is you fully understand the tool and you're implementing it so you can continually improve on that yourselves. Call it graduation, where people, after a couple of years, can just run their own quarterlies and their own planning sessions. I chose not to graduate because one of my favourite sayings is you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. And running a planning session for your own business, you'll never see what you need to see as easily as you will when there's a third party facilitating that planning. One of my favourite jobs now is to watch human reaction. I, for one, cannot control my eyebrows. Like my wife she was our integrator, she was our head of people and culture at EvoLogic, Ebony. Phenomenal human, I have to say that, but I do believe it as well. She would pre-warn new staff, if you're ever worried about what Chris thinks, just watch his eyebrows. If they're up, he's not sure. If they're down, he disagrees with you. And so watching that across the room is one of the best parts of a conversation. Somebody's laying out their ideas, their plans, and somebody will wince. And being open and honest, we call that out. What's happening over there, Jay? You're looking at me through your nose. And we want to have that open and honest, trusted conversation to actually get shit done.
Yeah. And that concept of being sort of third party, removed from any situation, removed from the emotion of it, I think holds true it certainly holds true in our business, sort of financial planning. One of the things that it's very hard to see when you're in your own sort of personal financial dilemma or opportunity is everything else that sits around it. And similar to what you've just spoken about, like being able to have trusted third parties, that trusted mentor, someone that can give you objective and reasoned advice is such a valuable thing. And like you said earlier on, sometimes in business, you actually have to go through the pain of realizing that you cannot do it all yourself. It's the journey. It's the path that nearly every entrepreneur, there's another one, has to go through to realize you get to the point where you got to actually make some decisions. And I think most people in business are intuitively good at a handful of things. Like you said, that, you're a people person, a people pleaser. It's your strength. I think we've talked about the fact that that's probably where I sit to some degree as well, in that I love relationships, I love communication, but there's plenty of things that I'm not good at. And sometimes you can grow a business in spite of yourself, and you do get to that ceiling point where you realize, actually, I've got to put some, if I want to continue to grow, or I want to make some decisions about how I want my life to look like in this business, I've got to make some calls, and I've got to actually have a framework that I can build around, and not only for myself, but recognizing that I've actually got to bring other people on board this journey, there it is again, with us, because how do you grow a business beyond an idea, or a sole practitioner, or a small business? How do you grow that with any degree of certainty? Well, you've got to have a framework. You've got to actually understand where you're headed. You got to understand what your metrics are. You got to understand your people. You got to understand your issues. So when you first read the book and you started implementing it, were you literally just implementing it out of the book? Like you just took it and went, okay, this sounds good, I'm going to start to roll this out with myself? Or did you pull in your leadership team and say, this is what we're going to do? How did it work?
Well, like most, I guess, owners of an organization, it's challenging to try and bring people along. And I use the terminology sometimes where, as a small business, you can only afford a certain type or a certain caliber of employee. And more often than not, you have to bring them up to the level that you need them to be at, because we're all trying to make a little bit of money here. And that's the whole point. And there's a certain tipping point that I felt it when we could afford to hire people that could help raise us, and it wasn't me bootstrapping it anymore. One of the lines I used all the time, probably too much, let's be honest, is we have the answers to all our own problems. We just don't have the capacity to execute on them. So as an owner, intrinsically, in your gut, what the problems are and where the issues are, but you just perhaps don't have the tool set or the time to be able to train other people to do it for you.
And execute,
like get you done. Being able to delegate, like we talk about delegation all the time, and delegation to a lot of people is abdication. Like, I'm going to give that to someone. I'm going to hire a smart person that I like, that I'm paying a lot of money, and just expect them to do the job. But I'm not going to be clear about what the job is. I'm not going to be clear about what the outcomes I want are, and I'm not going to provide them with active feedback on a regular basis. And when they don't get it right, I'm going to get really angry at them because I'm paying them a lot of money. Really common story. So just building a little bit of structure around that, so that, there's two things I want to do that, as I reflected after, I've built a business over 20 years. I feel it was successful by certain metrics or whatever those, and it's almost irrelevant what other people think. Now I get the chance, and I've been through cycles, I think most business owners, and I would wager that you've been through these cycles as well, where you genuinely love what you do. And then if one more person walked into my goddamn office with a people issue, I'm going to flip this desk and leave. I'd have joke moments with Ebony and say, I'm going to push that server rack in the street, set fire to it, and go and work at Officeworks. I'm just that over it, because you don't know where to go. You've got no tool set. Your experience is only your experience. So to be able to build a team around you and delegate down, that takes a little bit of an elevation of your thinking. There's a model of the thinking and doing pyramid that is taught, that if you want to elevate your level of results, you've got to elevate your level of thinking and your level of doing. I spend a lot of time elevating my level of thinking, not necessarily my doing. I'm like you mentioned before, I've been through, and I still carry the imposter syndrome heavily. Why am I here? Why do I deserve what I've achieved? But I always used to say, do I have a great business because of me or in spite of me? Would it be better without me? Because I see people and they're hustling hard, and I'm not a hustler. I'm a thinker, and then I'm a planner, and then I'll do some stuff, and then I'll go, should I have said that? Should I not have said that? And I'll go and doubt myself for a little while, and I'll come back. But I see people with this fear and this uncertainty and this doubt and shame about what they aren't achieving, and they'll never open up about it. So having owners fall in love with their business again, that's genuinely what gets me going. And then on the other side of that is to watch people exist in organizations that just have a complete vacuum of leadership and no concept of management and providing people with a picture of what good looks like. It's a goddamn human right for people to turn up to work and love what they do. So how do we do that? Gino Wickman's built an amazing mousetrap, and I don't need to find anything else. So I'll help people with that.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny. I know we spoke about it when we had coffee a few weeks ago, but there's so many, what's the quote? When you see the way broadly, you see it in all things, meaning that you start to see these, when you start to open yourself up to understanding, you actually see these concepts applied, in many different ways, but then you'll find someone that articulates it in a way that you go, that's me, that speaks to me, that's something I can actually work with. I know we have done a little bit of work with Echelon Front, which is Jocko Willink's crew in the US. And he talks essentially about the fact that every problem is a leadership problem.
Yes.
And if you boil it down, the leadership issue is one that begins and ends with you. That, the idea of extreme ownership, that everything is your fault, and if it's not, you need to find the reason why that potentially was your fault. Was it that you could have done better? Even the things that happened in spite of you, you might not have control over it, but you've got control over your response. You've got control over how you react after something that's occurred that was out of your control.
Can you use that?
Yeah, that's it. And when you actually, it's empowering when you start to realize that nearly anything that happens to you, it's okay. There's a learning in it. There's something that you can actually grow from if you've got a framework for thinking and allowing your team, if it's a business, to actually have structure when things go wrong. And even that idea of, Jocko would call it decentralized command, that idea of giving people responsibility, but like you said, not just leaving them alone, not giving them any support, but constantly saying, what do you need so that you can be successful? Because that idea of having, an army of people that think the way you do and have a framework that they can rely on and lean back on in times of difficulty is why, I suppose, even in business ourselves, we've sought over time, we've tried, we've spent time with PwC, they've done work with us, we've used some of Jim Collins' philosophies. Peter did the Fast Track program in Melbourne a number of years ago, and you do glean bits and pieces, but still, even our business, there's still those elements of a framework, a robust framework that everyone understands, that everyone believes in, that can help inform where you're going, so the mission, the why, but also make sure that people understand their part in it.
Well, there's a reason we call it an operating system.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I think it's obvious why you found it, mate, the operating system. Yeah, of course.
Come on. But, the whole concept of an operating system is to abstract the user from the complexities of the system that they're working in. And we step into a business and it is a maelstrom of just stuff. There's 136 issues going on at any given time. And how do you create structure around that? And that's, there's a CEO I'm working with at the moment who, I gave him a copy of your book and he's read it multiple times and he goes, I've been in some significant management positions and I reckon I've done 3-day courses on every one of these components, but nobody's ever pulled it together in this model. And that's the game changer from my perspective, is this is a teachable model. And then at some point you'll be able to walk the entire floor of your organization and see people executing on your vision. And that's the ultimate hair stand on end tingly moment for a business owner and a leader when people get it, because most business owners, they've got a great vision for their business. They know where they want to go, but they just don't tell people about it. They might write it down, but it gets stuck into a drawer somewhere and gathers dust. So how do you get that vision out of someone's head? Then how do you help an organization build tools and disciplines to be able to execute on that vision with consistency and accountability? Accountability is a whole other topic. And then if you build a leadership team, a bunch of managers, high-performing humans often don't work well together. So you need to build some health and cohesiveness across that team. So building those 3 components into an organization, that's where you start building a foundation for growth and consistency. And that's where there's 6 key components in that EOS will.
It might be worth, I know we can't read the book, but online or on the podcast.
Wouldn't be very exciting and probably copyright infringement.
Yeah, probably. But let's talk about those, because I think it's maybe worth, for anyone out there, the book is Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business. The author's Gino Wickman. We'll pop that in the show notes along with how to get in touch with Chris. But let's talk about those 6 key components. So for those listening, imagine, I suppose, a pie graph, the business, you and your business in the middle. And then around that, there's 6 key components.
It's like a Trivial Pursuit piece.
There you go.
Right?
That's it. That's a better description.
With some cheeses in it, or whatever people call them, pie. We call them cheese in my family growing up. So every good business needs a vision. You need to be able to articulate in a clear way somewhere for people that you want to take them. Otherwise, it's a never-ending journey. So every good business needs a vision. You can't execute on a good vision without people. And we talk about having the right people in the right seat. You mentioned Jim Collins before. A lot of the teachings in the traction in EOS borrowed from Patrick Lencioni, Jim Collins, Jim Rohn. There's a lot of great thinkers, and it's been distilled into an actual executable and testable as well system. So right people, right seat. You want to be able to start with some structure, so people need to know what they're accountable for. You need to find a tangible way to hold them accountable to your values as well, because it's all well and good to have a great set of core values. But if you're not living them and breathing them, hiring, firing, rewarding, recognizing, and then unfortunately exiting at some stage. We also want to run an organization based on objective data, not just gut feel. And one thing I love to remind people is we're not saying don't listen to your gut. Like, the entrepreneurial gut is a brilliant thing, but let's work on finding data to help you understand what your gut's telling you in some ways, and then helps you articulate that a lot better to your organization. So, and when we've got an organization with a phenomenal vision, right people, right seat, we're running on numbers so we know what good looks like now, then people know where the issues are. And they need to have a system to be able to bring those issues up so they know they're going to get dealt with in a timely fashion, they're going to get prioritised, and we know what the next steps are. We then want to create some process around our organisation so that we can scale, we're getting the right things done the right way every time. And then the last thing, we want to bring your vision down to the ground, get some traction. How do we set 90-day rocks? How do we move the business forward? When you tie it all together, and again, I ran it in Evo for 6 odd years. When I went through and learnt how to become an implementer, it was almost like the Wizard of Oz, like peeking behind the curtain. It's like, oh my God, there's so much in this that ties these things together. And when you execute on all 6 of those components, it is an absolute game changer in your organization.
How well do you think you implemented now that you're implementing? How well did you think looking back?
Yeah.
How well did you implement it at Evo?
Look, we talk about this thing called 100% strong, and being an entrepreneurial operating system, we want to do 80%. Like, we're never shooting for perfection. And that's one of the things that it's hard to teach an owner of a business who can often be a perfectionist. Ebony, my wife, had a jewelry business for quite some time. It was becoming quite successful, but she was stressed because she couldn't keep up with the orders. And I said, well, you've got 2 options. Drop your quality to get more out the door, increase your prices to reduce the number of orders. Which one are you going to do? I can't do either. So she closed the business down. I mean, that's really sad because it was great. So this is the danger of trying to coach your wife through it with a business challenge. And that's a really... Ebony has had a long history in customer experience and retail and hospitality, and could have really helped me in my business earlier on. But we talk about fear and shame. Anything by Brené Brown, read that, for God's sake. I was ashamed of the poor performance of my organisation that I didn't want my wife to see behind the curtain, so I didn't let her in. And I used to make the joke, a bit of male bravado that, got to wear the pants somewhere, which was hilarious at the time. But the second she joined the business, it took off to another level. She was respectful, and she saw things that I didn't see, and she was nothing but supportive. So anyway, that's a side story. Talk about rabbit holes.
Oh, it's a good side story. I tried to involve Kari in the business. I think we talked about this as well. Or maybe we've caught up previously. It lasted about 2 weeks, and we said we'll never do that again. So it doesn't always work, but
No.
maybe with some revisiting with some new tools and new understanding of people's having a role, probably help if I actually gave her a clearly defined role.
Yep.
That would help, wouldn't it? That'd be under the people element of the system.
It's quite unfair to hold people accountable to outcomes that you don't actually tell them about. Let's create some alignment here. Clarity is the biggest gift you can give somebody.
Yeah.
They know who the organisation is they work for, so they know that they're aligned. And that's something that was really important to me, and still is for such a long time, that I wanted to hire people that I wanted to hang out with. And it's an absolute privilege as a business owner to be able to hire the people that you turn up with every day, and then hopefully create an environment that they want to turn up. And we used to say, if you ever go and reach for the door handle on the way out of the house in the morning and you sigh and you second guess it, please have a conversation, because we're not doing our jobs properly. Like, there's a missing piece of the puzzle here, and nobody should have to do that. And that's a basic human right, to love what you do.
So just on that point, this could be a rabbit hole, but maybe not. In terms of people really being engaged and loving what they do, which, as you said, is sort of a basic human right, that they actually get enjoyment of what they do day to day, where they spend the majority of their time outside of home and family. What is that key? So what is the key? I'm sure it's in the principles, but objectively, what do you have to actually do to make sure that people actually enjoy what they do and understand? I'm assuming it's got something to do with knowing why they're there.
You want to believe in the organisation and what the organisation stands for. That's a really good start. One of the things that we teach is when you've defined your core values, we want to build a speech around that, which is some dot points under those values, but something that you can relate and relay the behaviours that exist within those values and what it feels like to be a member of your business, but also what it feels like if you're the wrong person in that business. And you want to use those as an attraction as well as a repulsion tool for people that are wrong fit, because that's the most painful thing you can have, is that somebody who's a phenomenal performer in their role, but just culturally a horrific fit for your organisation because they will poison the well. So having a clear values alignment, hiring the right people for, if you've got a team environment, hiring for people who have a high level of humility, they have a great EQ, they know that they're smart as far as humans go, and their work ethic is matched by everybody else's work ethic. Like, this is not EOS terms, but if you don't have somebody that's a good team player, everybody knows that I'm pulling weight for this guy in the corner, and that's where you start eroding your team health. People want to work with people they like. It's called work for a reason. It's not always fun. Like, it can't always be fun. Otherwise, what's everyone will be doing it. But I think there was a software company we used to work with who did some huge research on what tenure, longevity of staff. And the number one component that contributed to staff longevity was having a mate at work. Someone that they went to lunch with, someone they hung out with. That was it. That's what kept people around. So, you can attract people with your perks, with your foosball tables and pizzas on Friday, but they stay because they believe in your organisation, and they stay because they love the people they work with. And if they don't like the work they're doing, then you can either manage that or you can help them find somewhere where they do work they do love. But if you don't pay any attention, then a right person who's in the wrong seat will end up being the wrong person for your organisation. They'll just get bitter.
Yeah. Talking about vision and people understanding their purpose or their place and being engaged in why they're there, I know there's a process that the EOS system runs through in terms of developing your vision in high level form. What is that process? How do you actually go about developing a vision? Because I think as a business owner myself, if I went out and asked every one of our staff members, what's the vision and mission of Burke Britain, they would all give me probably 12 independent answers there. And most businesses are like that, where there's not one unified vision, mission, theme that runs true through everyone. How do you go about actually developing that? What are the principles to developing your vision and mission that you maybe know as a business owner, you probably intuitively, like you said right at the beginning, it's in your head somewhere. How does it get extracted and then understood and owned by everyone?
One of the biggest traps when it comes to, we use mission, vision, values often from a historical perspective, and they're usually paragraphs. And nobody's going to remember that. Like, this is the entrepreneurial approach. This is the 20-80 approach. We're going to do 20% of the work to get 80% of the outcome. Let's just have 2 sentences, for God's sake, because people can remember that. So if we've got a purpose, cause, or a passion, which is our why, we want to work through, and it's usually the founder of the business that brings that why out, because there's a reason they started it. And one of the tools that I used it this week, that was fun, because the answers that were coming out of the owner of the business were just, we're going to be different and whatever. And it's like, yeah, great. Everybody does. Yeah. What pisses you off about your industry? Why do you do what you do? What do you get out and go, God, these people, they don't know how to do that. What pisses you off? And then, so we talk about anti-values a little bit sometimes, because that's the inspirational stuff is, yes, we all want to be shiny and bubblegummy, but what pisses you off? And that's a driver. So the story I told earlier about all you IT guys are like snakes, like that caused my purpose and EvoLogic's purpose to come to the forefront, because our industry is looked at in a terrible light. We can't stand for that. So that became our cause. Like, we had to change that for the world, for Geelong at least. Again, whether we had made a dent in the universe or not, I don't know. But, we certainly had a great business that people as far as they told me, loved being there. And we had some long-term clients that we just loved working with. I get sick of people saying, it's not personal, it's just business. Bloody personal. Like, it should be personal. If it's not personal, why are you doing it? Like, let's get passionate and bring some love back into some stuff. Like, I'm getting a bit airy-fairy, but...
No, I like it. I love that idea of sort of anti-values, because that we tend to all gravitate towards the negative more than the positive. It's hard to see. It's actually very hard to see the positive in you. And I've spoken about this in the past, where your own biggest critic in business, and even as team members, we tend to maybe set the conditions where people tend to focus on the negative without the potential solution. But actually you can potentially use that as to your advantage by saying, well, these are all the things that we're not happy with. These are the things that the industry doesn't do well, or that pisses us off. They're the driving force behind what we want to be.
It creates passion. It inspires, because people like to see change. Let's not focus on the negative though, and that's something that I know Evo, we are good at what we do at Evo. And I say we, I mean, I'm not involved there anymore, but there's still some phenomenal humans there doing great work for people. We're own worst enemy, own worst critic, never good enough. Why did we miss that? God, we never celebrated the wins. And providing some context on that is nice now with some external parties who've purchased the business. Now the staff that were there going, geez, we were really good. I said, well, you still are good. Continue to be good, and don't settle for anything. I think it's a Fangio quote, always strive to be the best, but never believe you are. Like, that's the humility that should come with, which is actually one of the core values of EOS worldwide, is humbly confident. Like, we know our shit, but we're not going to be dicks about it. That's me paraphrasing.
Yep. I like it. I remember that one. Now, mate, we've been talking for, would you believe, nearly an hour.
Jesus.
So let's talk a little bit about those people that are listing, small business owners in general. Who is the type of person, business owner, entrepreneur that you potentially can support? Who are they? What do they look like? And how can they get a hold of you?
Well, we part of it, creating a vision for an organization, is to understand who's going to help you get to your vision, which is effectively a marketing strategy, psychographic, demographic, geographic. Who's your target audience? Businesses between 10 and 250 staff that are entrepreneurial, so that they want to do something new and interesting. They are open and honest and seeking help. The EOS will never work in an organization that thinks it knows better, or like I used to do, and this is the negative side of constantly learning. If you read 100 books every year and want to try every single one of them, that's probably part of your issue, right? We talk about growth on a ramp is constant pain, but growth on stairs provides growth and consolidation. And again, trying to teach my children, like, if you never stop to consolidate what you've learned, how do you know it's the right thing to learn? You're not testing it against anything. So the EOS model gives you that option to be able to, over the period of a couple of years, really embed tools and disciplines and consistency into a business. And then you can test, if you pull all the levers at the same time, you don't know which one works. So we have a method to roll that out across organizations. So you got to be open, you got to be honest. Again, that's a tenet that sits through every one of our sessions, is if you're not going to be open and honest, you'll never move forward. So it's got to be someone who's willing to challenge the status quo, and they're probably more afraid of the status quo than they are of change. Yeah.
The program itself, so what you mentioned, getting the group together, being open and honest, what do the sessions look like? Meaning, how long does it go for? How long are you acting as mentor or guide or implementer for them?
Yeah, so the process we move through is there's an initial day which is called a focus day, which is 7 hours plus or minus an hour with your leadership team in the room. We go through 5 things that are going to test me now. And we talk about a concept called hitting the ceiling, which is to get some common language across an organization around what growth looks like, and then how do you break through ceilings that you inevitably will hit. We build out an accountability chart, which helps get some structure and clarity across the organization. We help you set some rocks, some big tasks to get done in the next sort of 60, 90 days. We install a meeting pulse. So we teach you how to run solid meetings that we want you to score at the end of it, and we want you to get 10 out of 10 out of everybody in that meeting, which is a good test for value. And then we want to build a scorecard, so you know what good looks like at that leadership team level. We want to build some numbers, some metrics. So that's day 1. 30 days later, we come back and there's a day called Vision Building Day 1, where we review all the work we did on the first day, make sure it's right, because you've lived with it for 30 days. There'll be some things that we want to tweak. Then we start going through a core values exercise, which is a discovery process about what's core to you, not aspirational core values that you think you might be or you were at one point. There's all these traps that people fall into. We want to create a core focus, which is who you are, why you do what you do, and what you're best at in your industry. And then the 10-year target that we want to set out, which is an energizing aspiration, like Jim Collins calls it, a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, just out of reach, slightly scary, but should be energizing. When you say to your team, this is where we're going to be, you should get a resounding "we're in." And that's the goal of the second day. Third day, we continue reviewing the work that we've done. We then go through and we build a marketing strategy. We paint a 3-year picture of the business. We then build a 1-year plan for the business and then set a 90-day target and some rocks to move forward. All the time, building some cohesion across that leadership team level and also pulling out issues that we can then prioritize and solve. So that's the first 60 days. There's 3 sessions in that. And then we roll into quarterly planning. 3 quarters, a 2-day annual. We review everything. We ensure you review the past, learn from it, but let it go and celebrate the wins. We reset some targets. We then cast out some rocks for the next 90 days and we continually move through that cycle. So you get a scorecard to keep your BAU going. We know you've got to keep the lights on, but we also then need to move towards a vision. So that's where your larger tasks, your rocks and so on again, that's another Stephen Covey, borrowed, co-opted, however we want to call it. So we build rocks into everything we do.
I think that the point there is that none of this it's all borrowed. Everything we do is borrowed off other people. And
Yep.
I'm sure Gino having read.
It's credited in there. And on the first day, the first thing we do is we credit Jim Collins, Vern Harnish, and Patrick Lencioni for the work that they've contributed.
Who all had their own influences and borrowed from them. So we're really just, we're trying to gather together the pearls of wisdom from those that have gone before us and have it in a consolidated manner that is easy for us to understand. And that's the thing, even having not read the full book yet, but even just the first few chapters, what I have enjoyed about it, it's a structure that sort of resonates because it draws from lots of other things that I've read and understood, maybe haven't implemented or implemented poorly. It's not all of a sudden, it's not an epiphany that this is some sort of brand new whiz bang.
Nothing new, no silver bullets. No quick fixes, consistent tenets that have existed for forever and will exist for another 1,000 years. You know, if you're in business, these things are going to apply.
Yeah.
It's just a consistent way of doing it. So everything in the book is available. It was written to be given away. EOSworldwide.com, all the resources can be downloaded from there. There's thousands and thousands of people around the world self-implementing, and there's also about 25,000 businesses around the world using an implementer. There's 800 implementers around the world. There's 35, 34 in Australia. And we're lucky enough to have 4 of them in Geelong on the Surf Coast, which is insane.
So anyone out there listening to this, what would you encourage them to do? Do they get the book, read it first and maybe contemplate implementing it themselves? Do they give you a call and say, hey, run me through it? What would you propose?
If you're a slightly introverted, like to learn your stuff first person like I am, read the book for sure. Traction's an amazing book. There's also a book called Get a Grip, which is a fable version of Traction. Talks about a business that's struggling. They find somebody who can help them implement it up there and they run through how it works within their business. And I really enjoyed that one because it's a story. It's much nicer than reading a textbook. But one thing that anyone in EOS will do is, to anyone who's interested, and this is school groups, this is anything, if you want to learn this, we will happily give 90 minutes of our time to teach you the model, the tool set, and the process that we go through with no expectation of anything.
Beautiful. I think you mentioned it, but it's worth repeating again how people can get a hold of you. So how can they find you? EOSworldwide.com/Chris-Davies is my microsite. I'm on LinkedIn. Hit me up. I'm happy to have coffee with anybody, as you know. Yep.
You and I will drink coffee with anyone.
We might have to change that. I actually went off coffee about a week ago, but it was hard.
It's like I don't know you anymore.
It was a rough couple of days. Listen, I might be back.
I was going to say.
I might be back, but definitely have a coffee with Chris. I'll pop Chris's details in the show notes as well, so email and phone, and go out and get the book, Traction. Chris, I really appreciate the chat. Always enjoy listening to you and sharing some sort of anecdotes about how we've succeeded and failed in business over nearly 2 decades, the both of us. So thanks again, mate. Look forward to having you back on the podcast in the future and maybe getting a few more stories of businesses and entrepreneurs that you guide through this system. So thanks again.
Fun, man.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Ab.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at BurkeBrittonFP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS licence number 232706.